Board members and members of the community who've come to the meeting, thank you for coming. I'm Andrew Stuffler. I'm the building official for the city, and we normally have a chair for we have a standing chair, Patrick Carroll, but he couldn't make it today, it looks like, so we'll need the board as one of their first items here to business to nominate a person, second the person, and then vote on a person acting as chair today.
I'm going to nominate Eric because he did such a good job last time.
Second.
So,
No deed goes unpunished, Eric. So do you?
we got
I
her.
think I did such a great job.
Eden, yeah. He's not so convinced. Okay,
As long as
so,
I get the cheat sheet.
all right, we got the cheat sheet for you. Okay, I'll bring that over
I had
to
a
you.
lot of good help last
All,
week, too.
all in favor of Eric acting as chair
Aye.
today?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Let me bring this over to you.
Yeah, I did. Alrighty. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Appreciate it. And we will start off with a call to order.
Mr. Chair, is your microphone on? Is the light on?
Light on.
On.
Okay, good.
I'm being heard. I can get
No.
it closer.
Are you sure?
You sure it's on?
Can everybody hear me? No?
There
Now
you
it's
go.
on.
Now it's on.
Okay, sorry. I guess I'm light challenged. All right, I call this meeting to order. In attendance, roll call. I would like to, let's see, start with,
Bonnie Elliott here.
and
Vince Wood here.
I'm Eric Peterson. We also have in attendance Mr. Stauffer, the chief building official, and Crystal Vaughn, the commission secretary. So with that, I would like to open public comment for anybody wishing to speak on items not on this agenda. Please note, due to time constraints, each person may be limited to 2 minutes. So I've got one, it looks like one speaking slip today, and that's for Jim Marstown.
Marston.
Oh, Marston? Come on up.
Hello, Board. In the past,
Oh, can you turn that switch on if you don't mind? Thank you.
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. As you probably recall, in the past, I've come to you with the fact that it seems like the public from the disability community doesn't have time to put in any kind of paperwork before the board can review it ahead of time. And if you look on your staff report, I'm confused because you'll see that the letter from Mr. Stuffer was dated November 11th, but it wasn't put on the website till the 22nd, which then didn't give us any time to put anything into the public record. And I heard this also from the chairman of the AAC, Bob Burnham, who couldn't be here today, and he has given me his time because he could not send in any kind of written documentation. So I wish in the future we can look at this and say, how come there's no reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities to learn about these facts before the window closes on putting anything in the public comment? Okay. And what I want to point out also on the staff report, this is a common thing, so this is not about this project, but every staff report for Mr. Stuffler has 5 items that must be looked at. Can you see those in the first couple paragraphs there? They start with the cost of providing access as prescribed by the code. Okay. Now, these first 2 things are always dealt with here, the total amount of the construction cost and the total amount of how much they're going to try to do for accessibility. But the next 3 items are never addressed in the staff report. They're not addressed by the applicant. And so I guess maybe they have to be up to you guys to ask questions on how does this affect accessibility for these different groups? And what's the nature and purpose of the building in the first place? So I just want you to think about those as we go through this hearing, is why can't we talk about those things, the effect that it has? And a major thing we never talk about is, what does this hardship mean? Is this something that they wouldn't build if you didn't grant this waiver? Is it just, does a billionaire get a hardship waiver because he doesn't want to spend $50,000? Or is it something for mom and pop to be protected with? So we never seem to answer that question. How is the feasibility of the project impacted by the cost of a project? So that's all for my general comment.
Okay, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Because we weren't able to send in stuff early, I would like to have you, I have a few questions that I will ask about at the other comment, but I'd like you to be able to read them real quick. Save time instead of me talking.
So, Mr. Chair, just as a point of order, we cannot hear input on an item that hasn't been called to the floor yet, so.
Right.
Just ask him to read it later. Is that okay? I'm not going to talk
If you,
about it
if
now.
you give
what
them
is
to me,
this?
I'll hand them out, but we don't want to enter into communications about an agenda item that has not been brought to the floor. But if you give them to me, Jim, I'll give them to him.
Is this,
I'd like them to be read before I talk, because I don't want to have to read off. Is that okay? And I have extras if you want.
No, so
it's
Mr.
not,
Chair,
it's not an item today, right? We don't need to concern ourselves.
I believe this is for the item, yeah. So, just, as a point of kind of the order of the meeting. So, the board can choose, when we hear an item, we take public comment. If what we receive in the way of public comment is something written that we don't have time to read quickly, and can't be summarized in the 2 minutes that we allow the public speaker, we can extend the time, if we'd like, for the public speaker to go through the items and give us the benefit of not necessarily read it to us, but give us the benefit of what's in front of you. The board can also decide, given the amount of information that's given to them, they can decide to continue the item because they want to consider the input that's been given to them by the public. So the board is under no obligation to make a decision today in approval or denial. You can also continue an item so that you can consider things that have been presented. So the challenge that we have in these kind of settings is the public comment participants need to succinctly summarize what they're giving you in material to read, and see if they can engage you, get you to commit to read them. If they give you comment and say, there's some stuff I want you to read, but they don't summarize it, and you look at it and you're like, wow, that's 5-6 pages. Why do I need to read this? So Jim will, when he speaks, he'll have to answer to that. He'll have to say, here's why you want to read this. You'll find this, this, and this in what I gave you, and then you can make the decision whether you want to continue it and read it, or whether you think that's
At the
something.
time of the meeting.
At the time of that, we hear that item. And that goes for any item that we hear.
I have 3 copies there for the board.
So as a part of his public comment, he's submitting a document.
Actually, I'm not going to take it that way. He just handed me some documents, but it's not of his public comment.
Okay.
This will be given to you when the item comes to the floor. And
Great.
then when he speaks, he can refer to it.
I appreciate the openness. Just when I feel like I can't send this in to be presented to them a week ahead of time, then that's why I brought it this time.
And so and again, just to explain, so for people who aren't familiar with this, we are required by law to publish our agenda and our report 72 hours before the meeting in accordance with the Brown Act, so that members of the public do have an opportunity to read it, prepare their statements and their information, and come to the hearing and give input. We've gone beyond that and said, to try to accommodate people with disabilities, we're going to try and post these agendas 10 days before and reports 10 days before. We're going to send a copy to the Access Advisory Committee chair, and we're going to email the Access Advisory Committee chair and let them know that if they have any problems converting or trying to get access and understand the information that's being presented in those items, to call us. And we will personally arrange to have a meeting with them to advise them on what the items are and what the content of the report is. And we've done that, I think, successfully for the last 2 or 3 meetings. So we do
That's
provide
been
that to
happening,
them.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys have any other questions on that? No, okay. Then I would like to close the public comment and move on. At this point, I'd like to go with the approval of the minutes for the meeting of, let's see, it was November 3rd. Are there any comments from the board?
Yes, I noticed it's probably just a typographical error, but it says, Chair Carroll called the board meeting to order. I don't think he was the chair. I think it was Mr. Penderson.
Which,
Peters.
Okay, our staff secretary, Mr. Chair, is going to change that.
okay.
Thank
That
you,
was
Mr.
at that
Wood.
meeting? Okay. Any other comments from the board? Do you have a motion for approval?
I
I'm
make a
gonna
motion we
abstain.
approve the,
A motion to approve the minutes?
yeah, the minute with the correction, that very slight typographical
Right, with the correction that,
for the minutes of November 3rd.
that I was the chair. Okay, got a second? Yeah?
I have to abstain because I wasn't here.
Oh,
I don't You know, I don't have a comment.
No, you can still second, even if you're not here.
Second, okay.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any announcements? I guess those are board announcements, right, Andrew? Are there any announcements?
No, there are no announcements. Oh, Crystal's reminding me we do have announcements. Thank you, Crystal. We are not going to have a meeting in January because the city offices are closed. The last week of December, we won't have an opportunity to post all of our documents, prepare everything, and post it in time for the Brown Act.
Okay.
And it's a workload issue for us. Also, in February, we have a conflict, I think, at that first February meeting in this assembly room. So we need to set another date for the February meeting. Given that we're not meeting the first week of January, we could move the February meeting up into the end of January, or we can move it back into the middle of January. I'm thinking it would probably serve us best, if there are any items, to have it in January, the February meeting moved forward into January, because we're going to have another meeting in March. February is a short month, so.
Do you need a motion and vote on that?
I think,
Or can you just do it?
Crystal, yeah? Oh, okay. So we have
Same
we
day.
have the option of doing it on the same day in February, but doing it from 1 to 3.
Can I ask
Earlier.
if it's in the city's advantage to have another one sooner? Is there any,
We have no pending items right now,
there is no advantage to that?
not yet, but
Yeah.
December's just started, so. I mean, you never know, you never know, so. Okay, we can't check availability today.
I could try, but because, well, they should do the end of year, beginning of year policy, and then the revision of the rest.
I think what I'm hearing from our secretary is we're best off sticking with the normal February date
Just change the
and
time.
moving it to 1 to 3. Does that work for everyone?
Works for
Fine with me.
Fine.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Okay.
Those of
I'm
us
going
that
to
are
ask.
here?
I'm going to ask for a quick motion, second, and vote, just so we have it official, in case someone takes issue with it. So,
Sounds
Okay, I'll move for the secretary, for the February meeting, that we move to, from 1 PM to 3 PM, whatever the date was.
Do I have a second?
second by Wood.
Favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Motion carries. So then, I guess, is that it for announcements? That moves us on to item 1, which is no action needed. It has been postponed. So that moves us on to item number 2, 7 West Figueroa, the ratification of hardship. And we have a staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to have Lonnie Cassidy, our plan check supervisor, and Christy Foreman, one of our CASPs and a licensed architect, as well as one of our senior plans examiners, to come up before you and make a presentation.
Mr. Chair, board members, I'm Lonnie Cassidy, plans examiner, or what am I? Building plan check supervisor. And I am presenting the ratification for the unreasonable hardship for 7 West Figueroa Street. To summarize, this was a significant tenant improvement of $381,000 and $381,885 improvement into an existing 4-story building. The improvements were on the second floor. As you can see on the second page of our request for an unreasonable hardship, our access compliance form, the applicant was able to achieve $65,380 of accessibility upgrades. When they came to the elevator, that's where we're presenting the unreasonable hardship. We have presented the documentation for the cost to upgrade the current elevator. And based on the criteria that we follow through the building code, we determined that it was an unreasonable hardship. There's information in there that it would have exceeded, I'm sorry, let me get through this. Gotcha. I apologize. I'm sorry, yeah. The removal of the existing elevator and installation of a new accessible elevator would cost $275,000 alone. We did have the benefit of a CAS report for this building and site, and in that documentation, the certified access specialist had determined that the existing elevator did meet some of the criteria in the existing elevator provisions. So they were able to modify the cab to achieve 18 square feet. And then he determined that the elevator could be accessed using the T-shaped turning space. So this was another criteria that we did take into consideration, that the elevator would be able to be used. It was functional. And so that weighed into being able to provide a form of accessibility in that area. So if you had any questions for us, we do have the applicant and their design team and the certified access specialist here to speak to any questions also.
I did have a chance to review all the documentation that was submitted, and I think the only question, just to summarize, is do you feel that they've done all of the accessibility that they can do within the 20% threshold required? Meaning, I mean, they're saying that by the form says that they're providing $65,380 in accessibility.
Correct.
Right. The requirement for an unreasonable hardship starts at $76,000, right?
Correct.
So I just want to make sure that the $65,000 includes everything else that could be done to the building that's possible to be done within the required code.
You know, I think I'll let Christy speak to that, since she was the plan checker and had worked with the applicant extensively.
Yeah, I feel that they did a thorough job by hiring the CASP and going through the process and figuring out everything that needed to be made accessible. And they did hit every item that they could fix. They
Right.
did hit that.
Yeah, I
so.
did read the report, and that was very helpful, actually.
Yeah, and in determination of this, we did feel that the accessibility report provided was very extensive. They had done, their homework. They had been to the site. They did demonstrate, the maneuvering clearances of the T-shape in the existing elevator. So they were looking at, would it provide a level of accessibility given that it would remain non-compliant?
All right. Anybody else on the board have any other questions?
I've got some questions.
Good, okay.
Pardon me. I checked it out twice, and today I went Tuesday and today, and today I went to the front of the building, went into the bank to the front, and it's fine. But when I went to the side, on the Figueroa side, I went to all 3 floors just to look around and stuff. I guess my first question is, why is that there when it's really, really, really inaccessible? I mean, what does that do to the? What do I want to say? Why is there a side entrance to the building? Is what I'm wondering. What was it before? Which doesn't really matter now, but I'm just surprised that they went there from the side, from the Figueroa side. It's completely it's inaccessible. I've gone to the second floor. It's under construction, like I said, and the third floor is too, by the way. It's completely a mess. Is that what I'm not really clear on what the plans are. Is the second floor going to be? Is that the bank? Is that going to go down to the bank? What is that? I'm confused how it ties in with the bank. I mean, I hate to be stupid like that, but it sounds stupid, but I don't. When I get off at this on the second floor from the elevator, okay, on the Figueroa side, does that go? Right now, it was part of the bank, is what I saw through the window.
Right, the
Is that right?
second and third floor are separate tenant spaces from
Okay,
the bank.
they are,
So
okay.
you have that second entrance, and it is a historic building.
Yeah,
So there's allowances in the historic building code to do a push button, and that is part of their upgrades
got it.
to provide accessibility.
Okay. Okay. And another thing about historic buildings, I haven't, and I'll probably get closed down for this one. I haven't said this before, but this whole historic landmark, this historic sites and stuff, which are great, which is good. We need to preserve this stuff. But when it comes to not upgrading for all members of society, it's not really bringing everything to the present. It's like parts of history, you know, we used to have slaves. Women didn't have the vote. When, you know, all these things that were segregating have changed. But why can't we change the accessibility of some things? I don't understand that. And I know we're in the Mission Viejo section and all that, but it's to me it puts a building ahead of a person. And I know that's just a general comment. I just needed to say that.
No, they did point out, I think, that it is a historic landmark.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Right, and there are provisions in the historic building code for
But-
entrances.
But I
and
would
using
like to
the-
suggest that be changed.
Well, there is a code, the historic building code actually does address accessibility.
Not very well.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. That's not really our position here.
No, but I'd like to find out more about what can we do
Yeah.
about it.
This client, I feel, has done, the code is minimum. It's not a maximum. And they're meeting that criteria, I believe.
Okay. Another thing I'd like to suggest, and if it's on the second floor, is that they have this real bumpy tile. You know, it's the I don't know what you call that. It's a certain type of tile, and it's just really bumpy. Not the one in the bank itself, and that's fine, but it's when the first floor and the second floor, it's just really bumpy.
I
So-
would have to let the client address
Okay.
that on whether or not that's remaining.
Okay.
Is path of travel for the project?
Yes.
Yes.
No, it just has to meet path of travel.
Right, but I don't know if, they haven't started construction, so.
No, that's perfect. Good.
What was that comment? They haven't?
Right, they haven't put in the new materials yet.
Yeah, they are currently under construction, but they're in the demolition stage.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are working in the
Okay.
building.
Alrighty, do either of you have any questions for the applicant since they're here? Or did you folks want to make a presentation of any sort? If we don't have any questions?
I think they're over.
Not? You're
Mr.
not-
Chair, I think they're over here.
I'm sorry, you're not the applicant? You're architects. What did I think, you know? I'm sorry, did you? No? Okay. Then I'll open it to public comment, and we'll start with Mr. Marston again. Am I getting your name right? How do you pronounce your last name?
Marston,
Marston? Okay.
thank you.
Like Marston, Matty.
Well, everyone has different views. I hope you can look at my little list here. I try to keep it as short as possible. These are things that I think are missing from the application, which you should ask for more data before any decisions are made.
Oh, you're talking about when your initial comment list that you
No,
made?
I'm sorry, this is what Mr. Tucker.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you.
As Bonnie mentioned, there is construction going on the second and third floors. I'm not sure why it's just called a second floor application, but that's probably technical. But they're working on both floors, and they've started that for a month or so now. So the first thing I want to bring up is that this document, this staff report does not have a written application for the waiver, which shows the applicant's reasons for the request. They made a waiver, it's not in your report, so you have no idea why they're asking for a waiver. So that's a piece of missing paper that I think you should look at. There is no specific estimate for the elevator. Someone wrote a one-sentence statement saying the general cost of an elevator in Santa Barbara is $175,000 plus installation. That, to me, is not anywhere near a qualified estimate of how much it would cost to fix that elevator in that building. And besides that, there's no information that says how big the elevator cab is, how many inches short it is. It just says it's kind of compliant. And I don't think that saying it's partially compliant is what we're looking for here. But where's the data that says the elevator is X by X by Y by Z, and it needs X amount of stuff, and here's what would it cost to do it? All that stuff's missing here. You can't get a one-sentence thing saying an average elevator is so much money. So that's really missing. Then there's also an at-risk letter, which means that the applicant accepts the fact that he hasn't gotten final approval yet for these waivers. So if he does any work that has to be redone or changed because of the board's approval, he admits he's at risk for having to spend the extra time or money. And that should be something that you folks know about, that they have already agreed we might not get this waiver, and we will have to fix it ourselves. And the part that it's not there, the fact that it's not there is troubling to me, that you don't know the fact that these guys have said there might be a risk we don't get our waiver. And so I think the at-risk letter should be included in this package. Now, those 5 things I mentioned that are in the first part of the staff report that are required by code, one of them says that you need documentation of the nature and use of the facility. And I'll tell you quickly, this is going to be a shared rental office space where you can go and get part-time rental, okay? That means there's going to be people coming in and out all the time. There's going to be people who rent spaces. There are going to be clients that come in, and they might have ambulatory problems. We don't know. And there's also going to be employees there. There's going to be people there who actually lease the space out to you. So you come in and they go, oh, hello, let me show you around our place. We have this office over here available. This is available. That person can't be in a wheelchair or ambulatory problems. There's a second floor mezzanine or balcony that they have, to me, stealthily hidden from the fact they're asking for a waiver. The waiver was given based on hardship, but it's not before you guys. So somehow they won't put a wheelchair lift in to get the second floor mezzanine, which has 3 offices, which anyone with an ambulatory problem cannot access. The employers can't do it. The employees can't do it, I mean, the clients. And that's totally accident. Plus, they're not redoing the bathrooms on the 3rd floor because they say, well, there's unenforced masonry, but they can just take out a toilet and make the stall bigger to have an accessible bathroom. But that was never planned, or no plans were given for, hey, how can we make this bathroom more accessible? They just said, oh, it's not part of the project. So those 2 things were done, and they're not in your staff report. And I'm very afraid that if you approve this, you're saying that those 2 things are approved too. And just roughly, the wheelchair list only cost about $40,000, so that's not a big problem. Then they use the example of some of these things aren't being waived because it has structural or technical infeasibility. And once again, there is no data to say what that is. It's just a statement by someone saying this is structurally infeasible. A real report should say it's because of this, X, Y, and Z. This is why I cannot build this. This is why it's infeasible. And so I don't like the fact that you can just make up a term and everybody believes it. So that's number E. That's tough to me. And then they should disclose any other non-compliant aspects of the property. And they have not done that, as you just heard. They have not mentioned the fact that there's an inaccessible mezzanine or balcony. Okay? That's not been mentioned here, and yet that's what's part of this project. They also haven't mentioned the inaccessible bathroom on the 3rd floor. So there are other things going on here that you are aware of, which is kind of scares me. Okay. So I'm asking you to please request this missing information so that you can make an informed decision so that the rights of persons with disabilities are preserved far into the future.
All right.
And my last statement here is something that was brought up about the cost. Yeah, I think you brought it up, sir, about the 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Now, any project over the threshold, as this is supposed to be completely to code and also have the path of travel fixed. Now, these waivers can maybe adjust that, but there's no rule that says you can't spend more than 20%. Otherwise, you get a hardship waiver. Hardship number 3 says, what's the feasibility of the project being completed if you don't get the waiver? We have no idea what the feasibility is if they have to put the elevator in, okay? It's never been discussed. And here's what scares me. 20% of the cost that I took from the staff report was $76,000 and change. They're only going to spend $40,000 and change on accessibility. So they're actually saving $35,000 by not doing the wheelchair lift, the bathrooms, or the elevator. So to get a waiver there, all of a sudden they're not just not granting accessibility, they're making $35,000 that they should have spent on accessibility. This, to me, is terrible. Other cities might say you have to spend that someplace on accessibility. So these guys are getting paid not to build accessibility. That's, to me, pretty sad. And this last thing is, I'll leave you alone, thank you. This is a company that has over 3,000 leased office spaces like this in the world. They have over 1,000 in the United States. Their total revenues is over $2 billion a year. They're traded on the London Stock Exchange. And we're going to give them a hardship waiver because these poor people can't spend enough money, another $100,000 or something. Where's the hardship for a multi-billion-dollar corporation? And that's my statement. Thank you for considering those things. I hope you can ask these questions of the applicant and the staff, but I don't understand how you can have all the stuff missing from your report. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate that. Does anybody have any, before you leave, any questions? No, okay. Then that brings us to Will Rilling? Yes. Come on up, Will.
Good afternoon. I'm Will Railing. Nice to see you all. It's always hard to follow all the detail, to follow Dr. Marston with this incredible command of the details. He pointed out a discrepancy on your staff report in the next to the bottom paragraph. It says the applicant has committed to $40,795 of accessibility improvements. And then I heard staff mention a higher number, and I see that that higher number is actually on the valuation form, on the compliance form. So just a question that I have, if that can be resolved. I think it's possible the applicant committed to increasing the amount that they were spending, or maybe the $40,795 that's on the staff report itself. Was it
actual versus estimate?
Just as a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So if you'll take the comments from Mr. Railing, and you can keep a running tally
That's
of them
gonna
if you'd
be-
like, and then when he's done and you're done questioning him, you can
Okay.
ask staff or the applicant to come back up and
I was
answer
thinking
those.
maybe that was all it was.
okay? Okay. Congratulations, finishing the second full year of these hearings. I think we've all learned a lot. I'm still struggling and trying to learn as much as possible. I do struggle sometimes with the report. In the meaning of it, in an example like this, where you have some materials from the applicant that seem to discuss alternate grounds, different arguments, and then the staff report will recommend approval. And to the extent the staff report is not discussing or referencing or mentioning things that the applicant has brought forth one way or the other, I would like to understand whether to deem those as also approved by the approval or not approved, or just something in between. For example, this staff report is clearly just about the elevator accessibility, and that's what's at issue today. Because it's, and there's some materials in the staff report that, for instance, discuss the street level entrance and the sort of mezzanine or raised second floor level. So I'd like to make a quick comment on the historic building code. That's an area of real interest to me, and it will come to you quite frequently because there are now close to 1,000 structures in Santa Barbara that are eligible to use the historic building code. And my one quick point on that is something that's often missed, and so please keep in mind on this and future projects. The historic building code allows alternatives to the regular accessibility code, but in each and every case, it requires that following the regular code would threaten or destroy the historic significance of the building or a character-defining feature. So that last piece is sometimes falls by the wayside. You often have a building that's the exterior is historic, but not the interior. So, but again, that actually is not referenced in the staff report, so I don't know if it's sort of deemed part of the analysis here or not. Another question I have, and I realize I have no right to get answers to these questions, I'll just throw them out there in case someone knows the answer, is when a project is over the threshold like this, is not the 20% spend a minimum, a floor, that they must spend at least? Perhaps I'm misunderstanding that, because here, whichever number you use, they are spending less than 20% of the budget. I do agree with the comments that you heard that this level of documentation is not nearly as good as the documentation you've gotten on some previous hardship waiver requests. For instance, you know, an email on what elevators cost, generically speaking, in Santa Barbara is not at all like a bid documents that you got from one of the other projects, and that is, I think. Sorry for pausing here for a second. I would like to understand what a CASP report is, because it's been mentioned that there's a CASP report. There are about 4 or 5 pages of materials from the CASP who had worked on this project. Is that the CASP report, or is there a larger, more comprehensive CASP report, which it wasn't necessary to include? So that's just the question that I have. So I apologize for giving you.
Question. That's a question?
That is a question. I guess I'd say how many pages is the CASP report, and that would answer.
I got 5, I think.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand. Is this a CASP report, or is there something more comprehensive that the city has separately? And again, I confess this is just my ignorance on the definition of terms. So, all right, so I'll throw some questions out there. I do think that these decisions are made for the long term, and I do think it's appropriate to consider the nature of the facility. I looked in the street file, the history of this building, and it was almost sort of chuckled a little to see documents from the 90s talking about how, well, next time you'll have to fix your elevator. Kind of, I think some of these old accessibility problems are almost like old environmental toxic waste problems. They get passed on from owner to owner, and someday someone is going to have to fix it, and it may not be fair when that falls on to somebody as a burden.
It sounds like today's the day we're going to make that decision.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate everything that you guys do.
And just to the clarification on that, I think it is an elevator we're talking mostly about, right? There's other items, but the memorandum and what we would be doing is we would be making just a ratification of the hardship request that was made, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that what the board is being asked to approve or disapprove or make a decision on, ratify, is the entire staff report, which includes the existing building access compliance form, and that lists out what work is going to be done and what work is not going to be done.
And the more detailed elevator estimate?
And that's part of the staff report. You know, you can ask for a more detailed.
No, it's more detailed, I think, than what they're thinking we see. I don't know, but anyway.
But it is it's a ratification of the hardship for all of the accessibility work that's not going to be included as it's shown on the access compliance form.
Okay.
The costs the parts that are in the compliance cost show costs of work necessary to achieve full compliance elements that exceed the 20% hardship. Do I have that right, Christy? This the column here that lists the items that exceed the 20% in their access compliance form. That would include the $275,000 for elevator improvements and the $53,000, I think it was. Where was that at? I thought there was a $53,000, wheelchair lift at the bottom.
Procedurally, do we close public comment and then ask questions?
Sure.
Or?
That's how we normally do it, yeah.
Okay, so I'll close public comment,
and then we'll have some questions if you guys have questions. And I think I had a question regarding the cost of the difference in accessibility on the two, on the memo versus on the threshold, the valuation threshold form.
Right. So what was outlined in the memo is accessibility upgrades to the path of travel. That did not include the restroom costs. So when you look at the access compliance form, they are spending the $65,380 because they are doing upgrades to the existing restrooms and then to the drinking fountain. So we identify, because the elevator is as a part of the accessible path of travel, we did break out what they were spending to improve that element.
Thank you for that clarification. And then do you feel confident then in their summary of all these the accessibility costs that they've addressed the issues of this building? There's a form that they have to complete with check marks for all these different features.
Right. That, Mr. Chair, that is the form that we require with a tenant improvement to an existing building. So they are to complete this so that they basically identify what is compliant, what they will be bringing into compliance, and then if they need to request a hardship. So there are provisions in the code which allow you to request a hardship even if you are over the threshold. And that typically happens with the elevator compliance because often the cost to do the elevator can be more than the project cost itself. So the only thing in looking at the itemized cost is that they did reference that the elevator itself that cost was addressed through an email to Casco contractors. The rest does itemize items that they've done to complete accessibility per the form. I did include the CASP report, which it is identified as a review and analysis of the project, because I thought it did provide a good background of the different elements, identifying the street level entrance. So to take that apart.
Important to me with the elevator because they show an equivalent facilitation basically with the T, right?
Right. So to part it out without providing all of this, it does address items that are not before you. But I thought that it did demonstrate that they had reached out to a certified access specialist and they had looked at the project proposal and the existing site, and such as the street entrance, that is a code option in the historic building code to accept the power-assisted door operation. And then when it came to the elevator, they did do a good description of what the existing condition is and the modifications that they could do that were attainable, in costly, that weren't costly, that would gain them more access into the cab. So we do have, the applicant did bring their design team, and the CASP is here also if there are further questions.
Did anybody address the question that they had about the third floor bathrooms? And
I wasn't aware we were doing improvements on the third floor in this project.
come into play in this, would they? For you, you wouldn't require them to do the third floor bathrooms as a part of this project?
No, not unless they were using those bathrooms for compliance. So there is a provision in the code that you can use bathroom facilities on an additional floor.
Clearly not, right?
But they're working on the second floor. Let me confirm.
Got their requirements met, right?
Right. So the alterations that are happening on the third floor were not taken into consideration for this. But we do go, when a permit is applied for, we do look back 3 years for improvements into the building. But this decision before you is specifically for this project and the project costs.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Chair, it's kind of awkward, but I want to ask Lonnie a question. So, Lonnie, the scope of work for the permit that we're looking at, does it include work on the third floor?
No, it does not.
That's why the third floor is not included in the analysis.
Okay.
It's not part of the scope of work.
I got to put that together.
Yes, sorry.
Well, I'm doing that for the benefit of the community who might
Didn't you
not.
say there was work going on?
Or they're redoing the whole third floor, so how does it not?
Yeah, how is,
Somebody
So,
else might be.
Mr. Chair, we don't have to entertain this.
No.
We can if you'd like.
I
But
was
I can tell
confused
you,
also.
I'll just, to be a friendly building official, rather than a bureaucratic one, we'll take that into consideration. We'll send someone out to take a look and see what's going on the third floor.
My question is satisfied, so.
Bonnie, you've been there. Since you can talk, I can't. Tell
Yeah,
me
Bonnie, what did you find?
I think, I would like to have another site visit with the architect and find out. I'm really confused. I cannot tell you, I feel silly saying that, but you go in from the Figueroa side, and it says on the door, above the door, Oak Heritage Bank, and you go in, the first thing you see are 5 or 6 steps, and there's an elevator to the right. Go up in the elevator, and it's pretty good. It's not the biggest one I've seen, but it's fine. It's doable. You go up to the second floor, and that's still under construction, so there's nothing there. It's a mess. But Mike, what's it for? Why aren't you going to fix? Why are the steps there? What's going to be once this? That's the most confusing thing I've ever seen. I'd really like to. I'm sorry to sound so stupid, but
So, Mr. Chair,
that
here's
a
a good
question?
example of when we allow the floor to direct the board to answer questions, things become very disordered.
okay, sorry.
So next time you have a member of the floor, or member of the audience direct the board to answer a question, you might want to step in and say, that's not appropriate.
Okay, appreciate
Now,
that.
if they have questions, anybody from the public can approach Lonnie or I and ask a question after the meeting. We're more than happy to talk about the project, or a board member can come to me directly if they have concerns about something that's confusing to them in their review of the facility. We'll answer that as well.
So can we as the board discuss this with?
It's your
with
choice,
Lonnie
Mr. Chair.
present? And ask questions while we
Yep.
discuss it?
Sure, it's your choice.
I think I may ask someone from the design team to walk you through the improvements, because I actually haven't been to the site, and I think we may be talking about a different entrance into the building is my feeling. But since I haven't been there, I think I'll ask one of the representatives from the design team and contractor.
And I do apologize for my confusion, because I've had a very busy week and I've had a lot of things going on. So,
I would recommend that it be the CAS. So
And that's.
that might be able to
And
explain.
I'd like to just add that I've read that report, and I'm fairly comfortable with the report and the measures that they're proposing. If anybody wants to know that at this point.
Hi, I'm David Carlson. I'm CASP and also a licensed architect here in California. The third floor restrooms, the third floor, I think they should probably answer the question more to that. I was contracted to do the path of travel analysis, which Lonnie's already described to you. So I think maybe one of them can describe the rest of the scope of work for the entire project.
Okay.
I think what Bonnie's question was more on how you access the building, because I think there's multiple entrances into the building.
there's 2, yeah, the one on State Street and one on Figueroa.
So
What's accessible about Figueroa other than the elevator that goes to nowhere?
The 2 sites are actually, two portions of the building are actually separate tenant spaces. So there are two or 3 steps down when you come out of the bank into to the elevator lobby. So they really are should be treated as 2 separate entities, which they really truly are. They have two different street addresses. What we were asking the historic building code to give us a variance on was strictly the entry. The entry, the doors themselves, they open properly. They're the right sizes. There's a proper threshold. The issue with that is the slope at the street level. The cross slope, and that is obviously not part of the tenant or owner. That's more of a city issue to resolve. At such time when the city does go and they make the improvements in that area and level out the sidewalks, if they have a windfall of money that they can do these all throughout the city, then actually that door would be compliant. So what we're asking for that is just the push button which allows the door to open for a disabled person. So that is the only item on our list of things that is really covered under the historic building code. The rest of it are other issues which you've already addressed. The elevator, I think we demonstrated that the dimensions under the T size allows a disabled person to enter, turn, operate it. And then the mezzanine, we talked about the mezzanine as well, and the 5 or 6 steps up to those.
Conference room.
No, that's on the conference room's on the 3rd floor. So what we're asking for those 3 or 4 suites that are,
Mezzanine, what's going on in the mezzanine?
well, there's a floor below that raises up, and that's why it's 4 or 5 steps up. And so there's 2 stairways going on opposite sides going up into that space.
Okay.
Both of them, if you were to put a lift at the back one, the landing of that would then conflict with the access to the stairs going up and down, the egress stairs, the emergency egress stairs. So that really, you couldn't put it in that location because you do a flip up one and it would actually be right in that space. On the other side, the stairway narrows down such that you couldn't put a lift in there and have a landing on either side. There's 2 structural walls. They're concrete walls on either side. There's columns there and an electrical closet that's going in. So what we're asking for that, since those would be private suites for the tenant, the eventual tenants, if it's a CPA or whatever, that they would be allowed to then have an alternate site to meet with disabled clients, which is the conference room on the 3rd floor. So what in my report says, provide signage down at the lobby level, at the 2nd floor, at the 3rd level, directing people where to go, give a phone number or possibly a push button or something that could be an announcement to a person at the reception area that they could then come and assist the person that's disabled.
Okay.
And I think those things that we're offering for these 3 items that I was contracted to review, I think, in my opinion, that covers us to provide the greatest amount of access to the disabled.
Okay.
Right, so the mezzanine request came in as technically infeasible and equivalent facilitation, and that decision is made at staff level. It doesn't require board approval.
Good, okay.
Right, so but it is outlined in his report there. So that is we've anticipated that being a question that would come up.
All right, thank you. You guys have any more questions?
No, I got
You
that.
guys, so I guess then we'll go ahead then. Let's see, are there any questions from the board to the staff? That's the last, I guess. Do we have any more? No, okay. So we're ready to go ahead with a motion, if we have a motion here. No?
Go ahead.
Do I have a motion to ratify the city's finding that this is an unreasonable hardship?
Okay, I'll make a motion that we ratify the hardship request as defined by the city in this document.
And do I have a second? No?
No.
Yes, no? Can I make a second? I make a second. So now we can go on to discussion.
Okay.
So, so you want to discuss it?
I think they can, money's not a hardship here. I think that's,
Well, I think the issue is the elevator, and it's
Yeah.
like, would we require them to replace an elevator? And I believe it probably is
I mean,
$175,000, you know?
right, and I can fit in it well, but I have a very small wheelchair that most people, the average person has a bigger wheelchair, and they're going to have difficulty. It's going to be hard.
Okay.
Somebody an average male size that is a person is going to have difficulty.
Although they have said that it meets with the removal
Yeah.
of the panel, that it meets the requirements for the code, so.
Yeah, that's the question I have. They said they had a person went in there and checked it out for accessibility. Now, was this a person with a bigger wheelchair?
Yeah,
No,
that's a good
I think
question,
it
you know.
was during the survey, right? You measured it, right?
Huh?
To see if it would handle a T turnaround. The elevator?
So just as a point of order, again, I hate to be the
It's
person who's
okay,
always
please
raining on the
do.
parade, but once you've closed comment and you're going to board discussion, you need to open comment again, which would give an opportunity for everybody to be heard. And that's okay, if that's what you need to do to get your questions answered, but these are questions that should have been asked
Right.
before the motion, before you close the comment. So,
You wanna
Yeah, the
so
question.
first you have to open up,
So
Mr. Cherry.
I'm going to open it up to public comment again.
Okay, so that'll enable Lonnie to answer, the applicant, anybody else to submit any other questions or comments they'd
Okay.
like.
Well, I'm confused about this elevator. Bonnie says it's sufficient, but then she puts a caveat on it that it's sufficient for her wheelchair. And so does it meet standards for all wheelchairs or just wheelchairs her size?
Well, in the existing building, or in the code, it addresses existing elevators, and it gives parameters for that. In the report, it does identify that it is deficient in the size. It does have an overall size of 18 square feet, and what the CAS provided is that he indicated that they could access it using this T-shaped turning space, which is defined in the accessibility code as a way of accessing that. So while it doesn't meet the complete dimensions in the as an exception, it's very close. And
How close?
Lonnie, we might want to have the CASP respond to that.
Okay, if you have a copy of my letter from August 10th on page 3, that's where I come down with the dimensions that we looked at it. So the existing elevator is, the width is fine. The width, 61 inches, we're fine on that. 60 is what's required. It's the depth of the 42¼ inches that causes us a problem. Because by the code, the current code, it requires, I believe, 48 inches in that direction. However, when I did my research, I went back through looking all the codes, and the one that I could find that goes furthest back covering this was the 1995 CBC, which has an exception, and it says, and you can see in that one paragraph, when the enforcing agency determines that compliance with any regulation under this section would create an unreasonable hardship, an exception to such regulation shall be granted when equivalent facilitation is provided and where it can be demonstrated that a person using a wheelchair can enter and operate the elevator. And so the T-shape access, turnaround access, it is what is accepted in the current building code. And so I feel like using that for applying the current code as best we can to something that predates the current code, that provides that access that we need to get a person come in, make that turn, be able to access the buttons, and then make the back up and turn and come back out of the elevator. And I will note that when I surveyed it, there are some improvements, other improvements that were easier to be done that have been done in previous renovations. They put in the lantern lights, the buttons are at the proper height, there's a bar on the back, which are all the current code requirements that probably were not there years ago. So they have made all the improvements that can be made, short of removing the elevator, extending the size of the cab, which would mean tearing out that shaft and rebuilding the shaft and putting in an elevator which is 5 inches deeper.
Okay, well,
It's about 5 inches, 4.5, 5 inches, yeah.
well, okay. I see. My question is, what about scooters? There are people that do use scooters also. So, they're not. I mean motorcycle scooters. I mean scooters.
Yeah, the motorized wheelchairs, correct? Yeah.
Those are bigger. Just generally, they're just bigger. What if the client has one of those? Because that will not fit in that elevator. Sorry, man. I don't know of any scooter that would fit in that thing.
Well,
Or Bonnie, are you considering like adding a requirement that they have some kind of facilitation to change or provide?
I think they need a bigger elevator. I think, I know that sounds really drastic, but
But I don't think for the size of the project that's the question at hand.
well, I know it's a money issue.
So let me ask you, that shaft then would be what, 3 stories high?
4 story, 3 plus, yeah.
4
3.
stories high?
Oh, it goes down, I think it's a basement as well, isn't there, that it serves? So yeah, it's
That
4
would be-
including the
that-
basement.
That would be a lot of money.
So you would be digging out
I
space
have no
down.
question it'll cost every bit of the $175,000,
Yeah,
especially in
I-
that building. If not more. So, and that's not a question, that I have, but, and I don't think that we can mandate that somebody, personally, I'm having worked with the code, I just can't see doing that for, that's where I'm coming from for an elevator. I
Mr.
think
Chair?
That's why there is unreasonable hardship.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify for those who are listening.
Oh, we're still in comment. Yeah.
No, you're fine. You can talk. It is under the authority of the board to approve or deny the ratification of a hardship. So the board has the authority at any time to say we don't agree with the building official's decision on this hardship, and we think additional measures should be taken and prescribe what those measures are.
Right.
That is under the authority of the board.
That's what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I heard you say I don't think we have the authority to go there, and maybe you didn't meet authority, but
Maybe what I was
You may-
thinking was
justification maybe or something, but I just want to make sure the board members know you have the authority at any time to say, I think this is the level of accessibility that's required for this building, up to the minimum required current code requirements.
That's my point right
Yeah,
there.
you can't go
We don't
beyond
have the
that.
authority to go over
Right,
code.
but you can go to the minimum code requirements, right?
Okay.
So let me recap this. So we do approve this. We are approving minimum code requirements.
That's my understanding, that this would still meet minimum
No.
code requirements as a
Mr. Chair,
hardship.
that's not
As
the
a
case.
hardship?
Well, the hardship ratification is asking the board to ratify a exception, a reduction in the minimum level of accessibility because of whatever it is, technical and feasibility, cost, and the 5 different criteria that we have to evaluate there.
And but that's allowed by the code.
It's allowed, but it has to be ratified by the board. So you can say, and if I'm getting this wrong, I'm open
Well, and
to-
yeah, and I would just say that based on the code, which I did pull, the 1995 code, you have the authority to accept something that provides alternate access. And this was the T, which is accepted for other turnarounds elsewhere in the code, in my opinion, should be applied in this simply because the reason for having that dimension of an elevator is to allow a person in a wheelchair to enter, turn, operate it, and then exit. And the T shape does allow for that.
Right. Well, in various parts of the code, it mentions that the building authority, if there's a finding of an unreasonable hardship, can make a determination, right? And so I feel that's what we're doing, that you did, and that we're ratifying that decision, or that finding.
But so the board is under no obligation to ratify.
Right.
Or not ratify. So that's the board has the full discretion to be able to say, I agree with the decision and to ratify this, and I want to ratify it, or I don't agree with it and I'm not going to ratify the decision of the building official.
Okay.
Those are your, and then if you don't ratify it, you can say, we would consider ratifying it with the following amendments, and you can propose amendments. Those amendments cannot exceed the minimum current code requirements, right? So you couldn't say you have to add 3 elevators, because I like 3. All right, you'd have to say, you can only do what the code's minimum is. So I think what's been presented to you here is the applicant has taken the time and effort to have a CASP come and do an analysis for them and look at an alternative way to evaluate the capacity of the elevator for moving people with disabilities that are in motorized chairs or other equipment. And they've applied a T principle for turnaround as opposed to other design methodologies for turning around. What I haven't heard answered, and it might be Mr. Wood's question, is so using this T analysis, what is the maximum size piece of equipment, chair, that can utilize this elevator car? That was Bonnie's question, I think, was, so, who's not going to be able to use the elevator? It's not clear to Bonnie. It sounds like she doesn't understand who can't use that elevator when we use the T analysis. And if I have that right, then maybe our CASP could respond to that.
Let me ask you this question. When you check out an elevator, do you use a tape measure or do you use a power chair?
I use a tape measure. I'm going by what the code prescribes.
Okay. But you haven't physically experienced sitting in a
I
chair?
have not. I
Okay.
apologize. I have not. But
Okay. If you can ever get a hold of one, I would try it sometime.
no, I've ridden around. I have ridden around in a manual wheelchair to test out things. Not in this case, but I have. What I would say is that the code, like we've been discussing, the code describes minimums, and there are minimums for restrooms, which perhaps somebody in a wheelchair, in a larger wheelchair, cannot get around. But it is a code-approved thing. And so this is another case where, we're asking that, there might be a case where somebody in a much larger wheelchair that we have no idea what that size would be. In the future, there could be an even bigger one that we're not aware of at this time. And we can't. We have to go by what the minimums are in the code.
Okay. We have a public comment that we need to address.
Do you want me to stay here?
Yeah, stand by, I guess.
Okay.
Let's just stay there because we may have another question.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, our secretary is doing a great job keeping us on track. So we have an open motion that was made and seconded.
and was open for discussion, and then we opened public comments. We kind of have two actions on the floor right now, and that's
Yeah.
that's kind of a bozo no-no.
Right.
So
close
I would
one, huh?
suggest that whoever made the motion, I think it was Mr. Wood, consider withdrawing the motion temporarily, or just withdraw it, and then you can always make the motion again, because that way we'll have one item on the floor.
Okay, I want to withdraw my original motion so we can continue this
All right,
discussion.
keep procedures
Perfect, thank
on
you.
track.
Okay. Hi, it's Will Railing again. I only came back because I really felt this was that important to clear up, so we're not all back here doing this again. Someone's going to have to correct me if any of this is wrong. We heard that the scope of work for this project is the second floor only. The chair, if I understood, is looking at the size of the project as a key factor in deciding whether it's a hardship. So what I'm wondering is, Ms. Cassidy mentioned the 3-year rule, which, as I think you know, any additional work that happens in the next 3 years, the evaluation gets done again to some extent. I'm not sure if a full-fledged hardship is required again, but we're looking at a $300,000. What was the total project budget? $315,000. Now, if there's another permit coming back for the 3rd floor, which I may have misunderstood, but I looked at the demo plan, and I looked at like the 3rd floor was being completely gutted. By the way, the demo plan has expired, and so you'll want to reissue that. They're working without a permit right now. It's canceled, I think, after about 30 days warning. And I may be completely off base here, and I just totally apologize if that's true, but I thought I saw the 3rd floor being gutted completely, pretty much, and replaced as well. So if that's going to be a separate permit coming along at a similar cost to this, I also noticed a reference to the pretty good-sized replacement project for the HVAC of the building equipment. So I'm concerned that we get this done all at once, even if it means we have to come back and make sure that the board has the full project to consider, rather than have multiple iterations of whether now they need to do the elevator. So thank you very much for...
Thank you. I appreciate his concern. I'm a little concerned about what's going on all in that building and who's doing it, but I think I also heard the city say that they would be following up on that and would verify what was going on the 3rd floor and if there was anything that needed to be done differently.
And this kind of thing does concern me when there's tenants in different parts of the building.
Should I close public comment, you think, or?
Could I have one minute?
No.
You can ask if anyone else wants to provide public comment.
Does anybody else want to provide public comment
Yes.
briefly?
They don't
Thank
have
you.
to fill out a card, so you can ask.
Okay. I want to clarify something for Mr. Woods. The dimension of the elevator does not meet code, okay? Don't think that it does. Okay, so it doesn't meet the code. You have a right to say we'd like more documentation, which is what I sent out here. There's about 8 things that are missing from, to me, a good report. So you could ask for more information. And I've been there twice, and yes, they are working completely on the 3rd floor. So this kind of scares me that people are telling me, oh, it's just a 2nd floor project, when they're on the 3rd floor. And so there's something going on here that's not kosher to me. But please understand, this elevator is not to code now. And that's fine. If you think they cannot afford to build this without putting the elevator in, then you should give them a hardship. But to me, a multi-billion-dollar corporation can afford to fix it. Otherwise, it'll never get fixed. Every time this is remodeled, they'll go, oh, we got a hardship, we got a hardship. So that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, I appreciate your comment, and I don't determine how, I don't use the basis of somebody's worth as as a decision-making tool here.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, I've been made aware that the work that's under consideration, the scope of work, is on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the building. That's what we're
Together.
considering, right?
The whole, okay.
This project that
you.
you're considering is 2nd and 3rd floor.
Now, when they pulled their permit, it included the 2nd and 3rd floor. Is that what you're saying?
Okay. Well, I'm providing staff comment to it, so I think we can. Okay. So do you want to, let's decide whether we want to close public comment or keep it open. I can't provide, Crystal's reminding me that I can't provide staff input at the staff
I'd
level
like to close public comment.
until.
I'll
yeah.
second that.
Okay. So the question, Mr. Wood, was what the relative to the scope of work of the project? And please state it again, because I was distracted by Crystal while you were talking.
Okay, my question, we keep talking about the second floor, and then they say, oh, but they're working on the third floor. When they pulled the permit to do this project, to me, it's a building, and therefore the permit would be for the whole building, second floor, first floor, whatever else you're going to do to the building. Or did they just pull a permit just for the second floor?
This could be answered better by Christie, but I'll take a shot at it, and Christie, you can fill me in if I've got it wrong. If the work that's proposed on the permit, the scope of work, is just the second and the third floor, then that's all they need to include in their scope of work on their permit.
But you're saying it did include the third floor?
That's what I'm hearing, yes.
Okay.
But in our report that we have, it says tenant improvement on the second floor. That's it. It says nothing about the third floor.
That's where it's really confusing.
So we've clarified that, Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
that
you
it is the
clarified
second.
that. So we don't need to have.
But we
report
appreciate
amended
the
or
fact that
anything,
that
right?
wasn't accurate on the staff
I'm
report.
looking like a deer in the headlights right now, but, okay. So we're back to discussion, and I need another motion again,
Bring his
before we start our discussion. Do I have another motion?
I'm trying to think how to make it.
You can make a motion to ask, you can make a motion to continue it, you can make a motion to ask for more information, to continue it and ask for more information, or you can,
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve this, this hardship request for the elevator that at this point in time does not meet code requirements, but is felt by the city that it does meet code requirements of prior years. Was that it? 1995 is the one you're quoting? Yeah. All right. I think that's
It
kind of
met-
rambling, but it,
met the code at a prior year.
yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a suggestion to the board,
Please.
maybe the way you want to phrase that is that the applicant has demonstrated that the elevator car meets the T provisions for accessibility and turnaround within the elevator car, and that is an alternate method of compliance from prior years.
Okay.
And we've recorded that, so you don't have to repeat it. You can just say what he said, if you like that.
Do you want to make a motion for what he said?
Yeah, I make a motion of what he said. We approve what he just said. How's that?
Sounds good. We have a
Because
second?
you've
I'll
got this
second
all
it.
recorded and it's written down, right?
Yes, it's audio recorded.
And I'll second that. All in favor? Or do we want more discussion? I think we discussed it, right? All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
No.
Okay.
All right. Adjournment. I guess that's it. If there's nothing else, motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
I have to have a motion.
Official,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
you could,
Second
Oh,
motion?
I'll second
To
adjournment,
adjourn?
sure.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Right on.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you, Eric.